are worth watching. Men of Reddit, I have a male friend who usually scrolls through my Netflix and rewatched classic romantic comedies. I often tease him about it. His favorite is The Ugly Truth. I am curious, what are some films that people consider a chick flick or romantic comedy that you have watched and actually found good, interesting, or funny? Story 1. I liked When Harry Met Sally. I guess that's a classic romantic comedy. I also enjoyed Call Me Brother, which is a romantic comedy in a similar deadpan style to Napoleon Dynamite. You may correctly infer something about it from the title. Story 2. Love Actually. Crazy Stupid Love. You've Got Mail. Clueless. 10 Things I Hate About You. Groundhog Day. Sleepless in Seattle. Crazy Rich Asians. Beautiful Girls. Grumpy Old Men. Indian Summer. Mystic Pizza. Story 3. The Sweetest Thing. A 2002 romantic comedy featuring Cameron Diaz, Christina Applegate, and Selma Blair. It is one of my favorites. Story 4. The only movie I can think of is How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. It's like a portrayal of the eccentric women we encounter. Story 5. Bridget Jones's Diary. I laugh every time I see it. It also has a great fight scene with Hugh Grant and Colin Firth, where the fight choreographer has truly captured the essence of how untrained men fight. Story 6. You've Got Mail. When Harry Met Sally. While You Were Sleeping. Groundhog Day. My Big Fat Greek Wedding. The Sure Thing. Moonstruck. Story 7. I watched Forgetting Sarah Marshall 5 times before I realized it was a romantic comedy. I just liked the movie. Story 8. I find Sliding Doors to be an interesting glimpse into British culture. It also helps me when I want to connect different ideas. Story 9. Why has no one mentioned The Notebook? Where is the love for this movie? I could watch it continuously for quite some time. Story 10. I have a soft spot for Silver Linings Playbook. It may not be your typical romantic comedy, but I really enjoy it. Story 11. My mom and sister used to watch Pretty Woman so many times when I was a kid that I basically know it by heart. It's not a bad movie either. Story 12. I am not sure if having 2 female leads qualifies it as a romantic comedy, but I loved Thelma and Louise. Story 13. My Best Friend's Wedding. The Wedding Date. Last Holiday. Just Friends. Notting Hill. Hope Floats. I'm sure I'll think of more as soon as I post. Edit. Yes, I did. 2 weeks notice. The Proposal. Story 14. I watched 13 Going on 30 on a bus during a school trip and cried like a baby at the end. I received a lot of teasing from my classmates, but I didn't even care. That movie is great. Story 15. Many people have mentioned Crazy, Stupid, Love, which is a great movie, but I also like About a Boy, which is probably Hugh Grant's best romantic comedy, in my humble opinion, as he plays such a ridiculous character in it. It's hilarious. Story 16. To be honest, it's my favorite type of movie to watch with my wife. I find most romantic comedies to be short and, despite their cliches, often very entertaining and charming. The mindless escape is great for both of us. If you just shut off and enjoy the movies for what they are, a simple distraction, they're quite fun to watch and often very funny. Story 17. Anything based on Jane Austen, to be honest. Clueless, Emma, Pride and Prejudice, etc. Honorable mention for Mean Girls, Legally Blonde. Story 18. Lots of good suggestions already, so I will add some unconventional picks. I seem to be the only one who thinks Good Will Hunting is a romantic comedy, but it has all the ingredients, and I stand by that. It's just different in that he needs to learn to love himself before he can love and be loved by someone else. Therefore, Good Will Hunting. I would also suggest Pitch Perfect, not the sequels, just the first one, and Wedding Crashers. Story 19. As Good as It Gets. Jack Nicholson and Helen Hunt both deliver outstanding performances in this film. Jack portrays a wealthy author with obsessive-compulsive disorder, while Helen plays a waitress and single mother. Greg Kinnear also makes a significant impact as a notable character. This 27-year-old movie, released in 1997, still tugs at the heartstrings. Story 20. One of my guilty pleasure movies is called 100 Girls. It provided a realistic view of what a first-time sexual experience should be like. Story 21, 10 Things I Hate About You, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, The Wedding Singer, 50 First Dates, Twilight. Story 22. Other people have mentioned some of these, but here is my list. About Time, The Vow, Crazy Stupid Love, Forgetting Sarah Marshall, She's Out of My League, Pretty in Pink, Crazy Rich Asians, 10 Things I Hate About You, The Proposal, Jerry Maguire, 500 Days of Summer, The Idea of You, No Hard Feelings, When Harry Met Sally, Love, Simon, Punch Drunk Love, Clueless, Story 23. Both the original and the remake of Sabrina are great movies. The original features Humphrey Bogart, William Holden, and Audrey Hepburn, while the remake stars Harrison Ford, Greg Kinnear, and Julia Ormond. Story 24. I'm a pretty big fan of those Matthew McConaughey romantic comedy films he made in the early 2000s, such as Failure to Launch and others. Story 25. When Harry Met Sally is not just a romantic comedy. It resonates with me in how it illustrates two people stumbling and getting through life together. Story 26. Set It Up and Crazy Rich Asians are always enjoyable for me. Additionally, Set It Up has my favorite line applicable to real life in romantic comedies. You like someone because of all their qualities, and you love someone despite some of their qualities. Story 27. Tim Robbins, Meg Ryan, and Walter Matthau in IQ, 1994. Is great. It Happened One Night, 1934. Bringing Up Baby, 1938. Some Kind of Wonderful, 1987. Story 28. Practical Magic. Both it and the book it is based on are really good and honestly very touching. Their philosophy on magic and family curses is also very interesting. Story 29. I'll be honest, Asian romantic comedies and romance movies are significantly better than American ones. They tend to do a better job of framing constructive male-female relationships, unlike American movies, which often perpetuate the breakdown of gender relations in the name of making jokes. Story 30. Not a typical romantic film, but a series aimed at the same audience, Desperate Housewives. In episode 1, you may wonder why you started watching. By episode 5, you will be upset that someone stole Bree's casserole recipe, and you will be eager to find out whether she sends a sarcastic note through their mailbox or confronts them directly. Story 31. Benny and June, Stanley and Iris, Pretty Woman. There's something about Mary, Desk Set, Pillow Talk as good as it gets. Story 32. My Top 6. What Happens in Vegas, an underrated classic. Center stage peak 90s and Zoe Saldana is fantastic in it. How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, an absolute must. Matthew McConaughey is excellent. Failure to Launch, you want to dislike it, but you just can't because Matthew McConaughey shines again. Emma, 2020. There is an improvised scene that showcases Anya Taylor-Joy as a stellar actress. Also, the script is hilarious and period pieces usually are not. Pride and Prejudice, 2005. For the music alone, but the acting is outstanding. Story 33. Most of Nora Ephron's films are good. I am also a fan of older stories like Much Ado About Nothing and Pride and Prejudice. Story 34. Love the Ugly Truth. Bridesmaids, The Sweetest Thing, There's Something About Mary, half of Adam Sandler's movies, Miss Congeniality, White Chicks, honestly there's a bunch. Story 35. My parents watched this a few times with me when I was a kid, so purely for nostalgia, I vote for You've Got Mail with Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan. Story 36. She's All That. 10 Things I Hate About You. Josie and the Pussycats. Miss Congeniality. Bridesmaids. Mean Girls. She's the Man. Does Me, Myself, and Irene count? Not another teen movie, if you've seen enough to get the references. Forgetting Sarah Marshall. The Long Shot. Easy. The Girl Next Door. There's Something About Mary. Story 37. The Princess Bride isn't one that I particularly enjoy, but it's a classic, so I can't dislike it. Not to mention, I want them to break out singing the Broadway Men in Tights scene. Story 38. Warm Bodies is a unique take on a romantic comedy that I really enjoy. It was my introduction to Nicholas Holt's work. Story 39. I will watch Crazy Rich Asians whenever it is on. I dislike The Vow. She loses her memory and even has pictures of their life together, but does not try at all. She just runs off to do the same things she did before she got married. The Real Story is not any better. Story 40, Mean Girls, Bridesmaids, and White Chicks are fantastic movies. My girlfriend could list 10 of them without even looking them up. Story 41, Mean Girls and Love Actually. I watched them with an old girlfriend years ago and laughed so hard. They are great comfort watches and a good way to bond. I also watched them with my daughters and my sister. Story 42. The Proposal, Sabrina, He's Just Not That Into You, How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, Failure to Launch, Ever After, The Lake House, The Family Stone, Meet Joe Black, Legends of the Fall, The Other Woman, The Holiday, Moulin Rouge, Sex and the City, The First Wives Club, 9 to 5, Night and Day, Shakespeare in Love, Emma, Tristan and Isolde, and 2 Weeks Notice. If you want to cry, or at least I did, consider If I Stay. Story 43. Set It Up. It gave me a very heartfelt line that I think about often. You like because, and you love despite. You like someone for their good qualities, and you love them despite some of their bad ones. I like you almost as much as I love you. Story 44. Hitch, 10 Things I Hate About You, 50 First Dates, Click. I now pronounce you Chuck and Larry, Meet the Fockers, and that entire series. Guess who? I'm sure I could come up with more. Story 45. I love romantic comedies. There are too many to list. However, for a long time I enjoyed Crazy Stupid Love, featuring Steve Carell, Ryan Gosling, and Emma Stone. I can't recall who else was in it. Story 46. Notting Hill is the ultimate male fantasy. A gorgeous, super famous actress falls for a regular guy. I also forgot to mention A Walk to Remember, featuring Mandy Moore. Story 47. I have a soft spot for The Prince and Me with Julia Stiles. I didn't like her as an actress until I saw this film. Bonus, Tractor Races. Story 48. My personal guilty pleasure choice is One Day. I even got the book. And I guess now I'm going to watch the series as well after just finding out about it a moment ago. Story 49. Maybe not what you were actually asking about, but I really enjoyed reading Pride and Prejudice in high school. Several years ago, I discovered a YouTube adaptation called The Lizzie Bennet Diaries that was excellent. Story 50. I can't remember how romantic it is, but I recommend Dating the Enemy. It's a 90s Australian film where Guy Pearce, known for Memento, plays a self-centered TV host who wakes up body-swapped with his girlfriend, Claudia Carvin, from Daybreakers. Story 51. The Proposal. A calm and witty Ryan Reynolds, the always gorgeous Sandra Bullock, and Betty White, along with the hottest male stripper in movies. Story 52. In Her Shoes stars Toni Collette, Cameron Diaz, and Shirley MacLaine. It is a great film about family dynamics rather than romantic relationships. Story 53. Categorically not a romantic comedy, but I've always enjoyed a good romantic movie. No shame. I'm going to recommend something that is related but more of a buddy movie. Changeland. Story 54. A Life Less Ordinary, 1997. Story 55. Harold and Maude. Shakespeare in Love. What Women Want. What Men Want. How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. 10 Things I Hate About You. Mean Girls. White Chicks. The Hot Chick. Dirty Dancing. Punch Drunk Love. Licorice Pizza. Scent of a Woman. Moonstruck. Silver Linings Playbook. Story 56. Made in Heaven. A Tale of Winter. Before Sunrise, the entire trilogy is excellent. Before Sunset and Before Midnight are parts 2 and 3. Chasing Amy. The Wedding Singer. For Weddings and a Funeral. While You Were Sleeping. My Best Friend's Wedding. Story 57. I don't know if this counts, but it gave off chick flick vibes. Crazy Rich Asians was much better than I ever would have expected. Story 58. A friend of mine recently asked me about this, and I told her that I have no idea. I don't label a movie as a chick flick and do not keep lists of this type. I don't care if it's a chick flick or not. I'll watch anything. Story 59. About Time. I assume that some would consider it a romantic film because it's about falling in love, but it's truly excellent. It's one of my comfort movies. Crazy, Stupid Love is less of a romantic film, but it is incredibly funny. Story 60. Moonstruck is one of those movies that deserves an ensemble cast Oscar. Every role in this film is perfectly cast. Story 61. About Time, probably not actually a romantic comedy, but it seems that way on the surface. It is a great movie about much more than romantic love. It also explores love toward your family, especially between a father and son. The Big Sick, a unique romantic comedy that is based on Kumail Nanjiani's life. When Harry Met Sally, an absolute classic for a reason. It is a well-made, great movie from start to finish. Crazy, Stupid Love, a great romantic comedy that loosely explores some deeper themes about marriage and toxic masculinity. Story 62. Mating Habits of the Earthbound Human. Imagine an alien race producing a documentary about human dating in the 1990s, narrated by David Hyde Pierce. Story 63. Sweet Home Alabama. Just Friends. A Walk to Remember, not a romantic comedy, more in the chick flick category. Story 64. Date Night was a fun watch. I thought I was going in for a cheesy romantic comedy, but I was completely blindsided by what it actually was. Story 65. Playing by Heart is full of smart humor and thoughtful scenarios about relationships, featuring great actors throughout. Story 66. Huge fan of Mean Girls, Bridesmaids, Love Actually, Love Rosie, Music and Lyrics, and Wimbledon. There are others too, but these always resonate. Story 67. Not quite a chick flick or a romantic comedy, but with similar dramatic vibes, The Intern, starring Anne Hathaway and Robert De Niro, is an enjoyable film mainly focused on friendships. Story 68. The 5-year engagement hits all my notes on what a romantic comedy should be. It explores compromise in a relationship, conflict, flaws, and the struggle to persevere. The problem with relationships is that, most of the time, they weren't right for each other to begin with. But even when they are meant to be, that couple will go through the same challenges as everyone else. This film does a great job of showing how destructive it can be when they let negativity win. It's also just hilarious. Jason Segel is a gem. Story 69. Bridesmaids is my all-time favorite. 13 going on 30. 50 First Dates. Just go with it. This is 40. The House Bunny. Story 70. Hey OP, if you like 10 Things I Hate About You. The screenwriters for that film also wrote Legally Blonde. It is equally witty and heartwarming. They also wrote She's the Man, but I haven't seen that one, so I can't comment on its quality. Story 71. Riding in Cars with Boys stars Drew Barrymore, Steve Zahn, Brittany Murphy, James Woods, and Karen from Goodfellas. Story 72. A selection of popular movies includes She's the Man, Mean Girls, The Pitch Perfect series, Legally Blonde, Sweet Home Alabama. This means War, The Proposal, and The Duff, just to name a few. You may not want to watch them all the time, but they can be enjoyable occasionally. Story 73. Romantic comedies are my favorite type of movies, but I also love action. Here are some of my favorites. Sleepless in Seattle, 27 Dresses, You've Got Mail, and Blast from the Past, which is a very old film from the 90s featuring Brendan Fraser. Story 74. Silver Linings Playbook presents a poignant concept of two individuals with mental health challenges forming a relationship, evoking both laughter and tears. Story 75. This genre is my secret guilty pleasure. 50 First Dates, 17 Again, Yes Man, The Ugly Truth, Definitely Maybe, 13 going on 30, Good Luck Chuck, Maid of Honor, What Women Want, Crazy Stupid Love, No Hard Feelings, and Music and Lyrics. Bonus. 500 Days of Summer. I wasn't a fan, but you might like it. Enchanted, and Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Story 76. Plus One with Maya Erskine and Jack Quaid. Wait, sorry, not a man. Sometimes I just click on things. Story 77. I love a good romantic comedy. Moonstruck, Don Juan DeMarco, Sleepless in Seattle, 50 First Dates, Annie Hall. There are many great films in this genre. However, I recommend sticking with the classics, as there hasn't been a decent one made in about 15 years. Story 78. Here are some of my personal favorites with a sales pitch for anyone on the fence about watching them. 10 Things I Hate About You, a fantastic retelling of Shakespeare's Taming of the Shrew. Incredibly sharp dialogue and standout performances by Heath Ledger and Julia Stiles. Ms. Congeniality. Sandra Bullock plays an antisocial, tomboyish FBI agent forced to infiltrate the Ms. United States beauty pageant. Hilarity ensues. Enchanted. Amy Adams excels as a naive Disney princess suddenly transported to New York City. It's a charming fish-out-of-water story and a stellar homage to classic Disney films. Legally Blonde. A pink-obsessed sorority girl applies to Harvard Law School to spite her boyfriend after he claimed she wasn't smart enough to marry him. It's a brilliant deconstruction of the dumb blonde stereotype and super heartwarming to boot. Story 79. Fool's Rush and features Salma Hayek near her peak. Just Friends stars Ryan Reynolds. Enjoy being the girl who peaked in high school. Great comeback. Story 80. Aside from the ones already mentioned, I kind of like The Edge of 17. It's wholesome and makes me happy sometimes. Story 81. When Harry Met Sally, you've got Male Joe versus the Volcano City of Angels. There are also some Chinese films that I'm a fan of. I could go on about romance movies, but off the top of my head, these are the ones I like best. Story 82. Win a Date with Tad Hamilton is great. 500 Days of Summer, 50 First Dates, Uptown Girls, The Big Sick, and Mr. Right. Story 83. I was always partial to must-love dogs, mainly because my mom owns a dog grooming business and has operated it since before I was born. Dogs have always been a significant part of my life. Story 84. Better Off Dead is one of the funniest movies of the 1980s and is essentially a romantic comedy. It still holds up today. Story 85. French Kiss, 1995. Good Advice, 2001. Eat, Pray, Love, 2010. Ever After, 1998. Shakespeare in Love, 1998. She's Out of My League, 2010. Love and Other Drugs, 2010. Definitely Maybe, 2008. An honorable mention goes to Shrinking, which is not a romantic comedy but a great show. Always Be My Maybe, starring Ali Wong and Randall Park, is also fantastic. Punch Drunk Love isn't a romantic comedy, but it is a remarkable movie. Story 87. As Time Goes By is a low-key romantic comedy from the UK. It features Judi Dench and Jeffrey Palmer, along with a talented supporting cast. This 1990s television show becomes more enjoyable the longer you watch it. The humor is distinctly British. Story 88. 50 First Dates is a romantic comedy with a harsh twist. Along Came Polly, the 40-year-old virgin. Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Friends with Benefits. Story 89. I like many of the replies already, so I am adding these. Definitely, maybe. 17 again. Zac Efron before his unusual plastic surgery. I also like the ones mentioned earlier. Crazy Stupid, Love, Hitch, The Girl Next Door, Love Actually, Notting Hill. Story 90. Legally Blonde is a masterpiece. Pride and Prejudice, 2005, is good. Greta Gerwig's Little Women is also a great period romance. Lady Bird is hard to describe, but it's a fantastic watch. I'm not sure if this qualifies as a romantic film. Melancholia is like a classical painting that moves, if that makes sense. I enjoy romantic films, but I'm more into artsy sad movies than romantic comedies. Story 91. Not sure if anyone mentioned Benny and June, Urban Cowboy, A Thing Called Love, Pure Country, or A Walk to Remember. My older sister always picked the movies. Story 92. How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. No? Okay. Some other favorites would be The Ugly Truth, 50 First Dates, Friends with Benefits, Easy A, 10 Things I Hate About You, Mamma Mia, Before Sunrise. Story 93. The soundtrack is impressive, featuring great performances from the cast and an overall funny and entertaining story, even with the peculiar stepbrother dynamics. Story 94. Can't believe The Devil Wears Prada hasn't been mentioned. Not a romantic comedy, but I dismissed this as a chick flick 4 years before giving it a chance. Also, Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist is a great one. Story 95. Best film I have seen about stigma or neurodiversity. Aubrey Plaza. Okay, except maybe as good as it gets. Touched with Fire. A love story between two bipolar poets. What Dreams May Come. Story 96. Not sure if it counts as a chick flick, but Love Actually is a great romantic comedy. If you are open to watching anime, go see Netju no Susum. Story 97. Like Crazy. Blue Valentine. American Honey. When Harry Met Sally. What Dreams May Come. Borderline romantic dramas. Hesher. London. Bellflower. Avon. Story 98. 10 Things I Hate About You is the ultimate 1990s romantic comedy in my opinion. It features a great cast of rising stars, quotable lines, and a vivid representation of Seattle in the 1990s. Plus, Heath Ledger delivers a memorable performance. Story 99. I always thought that 17 Again was pretty decent. It has just enough other elements to make it worth watching, especially for Lord of the Rings fans, if you don't mind the romantic aspects. It may not completely qualify as a romantic comedy, but its core theme is love. Story 100. I just watched The Princess Bride, and I think I have a new favorite. Thank you for the recommendations. Story 101. 50 First Dates is my go-to film. The most romantic gesture is waking up every single day just to get a girl to acknowledge you, who forgets the next day. It is one of those stories that is unique to its genre but hilarious and wholesome at its core. Story 102. There aren't many that I like. One that I don't mind is The Proposal with Ryan Reynolds and Sandra Bullock, mainly because it is quite hilarious once you get past all the romantic elements. Story 103. They really don't make movies like these anymore. All they do now is cast TikTok influencers who cannot act. Story 104. The ones who know that a man will have to watch a film with his partner often include subtle surprises for him. A prime example is the inclusion of a really cool car, often one owned by the love interest, which adds to his appeal like a classic Land Rover Defender. I understand these films are meant to be sentimental and serve as entertaining escapism. However, incorporating those little surprises for the man who might have to watch a romantic comedy makes it even better. Story 105. Couples Retreat is more of a comedy, but I love that movie. Something's got to give. It's complicated. It's great. Story 106. If you want something more recent, I really enjoyed Love at First Sight. It's not particularly special, but for me, it had the right amount of cheesiness that made it a great watch. Other than that, many great films have already been mentioned. Story 107. Go watch 500 Days of Summer. Watch it from the perspective of the guy, then rewatch it keeping summer in mind. It is a coming-of-age movie disguised as a romantic comedy. Semi-spoilers ahead. I watched it as a kid from the guy's side and grew up to realize that maybe summer was right all along. It's nearly beautiful how it begins by telling you it is not a romantic comedy, but because you've been so trained by other romantic comedies, you still want to believe things work out. It gaslights you the whole way into believing both sides are true. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.